Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Today we're talking about our quarterbacks that we're going to start and sit for Week 14 fantasy football. And full disclosure, we ain't getting cute at all this week with our quarterbacks. We're going to try to start the guys with the safest floors so we don't do anything stupid here as we head into the fantasy playoffs. But before we get into Week 14, how do we do here in Week 13? And I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little bit pissed off that Patrick Mahomes kept us away from our 70% streak that we've had at the quarterback position. Once again, Patty Mahomes struggled. You can see some of our bigger hits and misses here from Week 13. But now is time to dive into Week 14. And like I said, we're not going to get cute here this week. Going to try to look for those safer plays for the quarterback position since there's so much volatility at the running back position, the wide receiver, and the tight end. A lot of question marks around those positions. We got to kind of, play it a little bit safer at quarterback here this week. We're going to kick it off Thursday Night Football, Pittsburgh Steelers, Minnesota Vikings. And right off the bat, safe, old, reliable, Kirk Cousins. Is he safe and reliable here this week? No Adam Thielen, potentially no Dalvin Cook, and now a matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who allow right around 18 fantasy points per game. But he should still have enough weapons to go out there and hit right around those 18 fantasy points or so that we're looking for. We kind of got a sneak peek at what this may look like last week, right? No Dalvin Cook, and Adam Thielen only played in 6 snaps in that ball game. Kirk Cousins went out, had 40 pass attempts for the first time since Week 6. KJ Osborne, a decent number 2 option in this offense. Look for a little bit more maybe reliability on the tight end position here in Week 14 because Cousins has had at least 2 passing touchdowns in 6 of the last 7 games he's played. He's quarterback 8 overall. Still going to be a start, but maybe a little bit lower ranked here this week since he's missing some weapons. As for Big Ben, dude is good. Dude is washed. Dude is good. Dude is washed. I just don't understand what's going on here with Big Ben Roethlisberger. I want to trust it, right? You see when he's good, you want to have him in your fantasy lines, but the problem is it's just not consistent at all with Big Ben, and he's only had 1 road game all year in which he's thrown for more than 1 touchdown. This game on the road, Minnesota does allow right around 19 fantasy points per game, and Big Ben's been protecting the football. Only 2 interceptions in his last 7 games played, but honestly, it's just too risky. The peaks and the valleys are too high and too low. I'm not trusting Big Ben here in playoff territory. He's going to be a sit. But like we always do, we're going to hip thrust it over to Sunday football, talking the Baltimore Ravens and Cleveland Browns, and pretty clear here, right? We can't sit Lamar Jackson. It was good to see him back last week inside the top 12 overall quarterbacks, but these 2 teams just faced off in Week 12 against each other. It was not good for Lamar Jackson. The Cleveland defense really got to him, the pass rush, exceptionally well against these Baltimore Ravens offensive linemen, and it forced Lamar Jackson to throw 4 interceptions, one of his worst games of the entire year, but he's too good to sit, right? If you have Lamar Jackson, you have to, take what you get and start him on a weekly basis because he single-handedly can win you your matchup, so he's a start. As for Baker, he didn't do bad in their matchup Week 12, 247 yards, 1 touchdown, no interception. But it's really been the same thing all year long for Baker Mayfield. His ceiling is just not high enough. He only has 1 game out of his last 5 in which he has at least 2 touchdowns. Now, there is no Marlon Humphrey for the Baltimore Ravens, which helps things, but they're not a heavy enough passing team to go out there and really be safe and confident starting Baker Mayfield. They're going to rely on the run. A whole lot of Nick Chubb, a whole lot of Kareem Hunt, a lot less Baker Mayfield. Over to Tennessee now for the Titans and the Jags, and the world is right once again, right? We saw Trevor Lawrence this past week and go out and have no touchdowns. So, he's starting a new streak here, apparently, because he had no passing touchdowns in 4 out of the last 5 games he's played, and he's only thrown for over 200 yards in 1 game out of the last 5 that he's played. Now, Tennessee allows right around 20 fantasy points per game, but Trevor Lawrence hasn't hit 20 points in a game since Week 1. He's definitely going to remain a sit for me in that absolute cluster that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. As for Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans, he's going to be glad to have Julio Jones back. But you want to know what's crazy? Ryan Tannehill only has 2 games all year with 2 or more touchdowns, which is absolutely nuts to think about because this guy's been throwing touchdowns in a very efficient offense for years. Now a matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They all run around 17 fantasy points per game, but in my opinion, Ryan Tannehill just been too inconsistent to trust on a weekly basis. Sure, having Julio Jones back could help, but Julio Jones also coming back. Is he going to get the full workload? Are they going to just absolutely pepper Julio Jones? I can't see that either. They don't want to re-aggravate any past injuries and just lose the guy right away once again. Now, the Jacksonville defense actually playing a little bit better than a lot of people want to give them credit for it, and for that reason, I'm going to sit Tanny again here this week. Over to Kansas City now for the Chiefs and the Raiders, and so much for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs coming off their bye week and starting off hot in the second half, right? No, not so much. Patrick Mahomes now has back-to-back games in which he's thrown for 0 touchdown passes. That is not ideal, my fantasy friends. The first time he's probably had that happen since like Pee Wee football or something where they only throw the ball like once a game. Absolutely crazy. But here is the silver lining. He faced this same Las Vegas team back in week 10. In that game, 50 pass attempts, 400 yards passing, and 5 touchdowns. It was his only game since October in which he's had more than 2 passing touchdowns. Let that sink in here just a little bit. We're kind of going to hope that the dominance against the Raiders continues, and as crazy as it sounds, because it's usually just a smash start, we'll continue to start Patrick Mahomes in a good matchup here this week. As for Derek Carr, he's been less than consistent himself, right? Only 1 game out of the last 5 in which he has at least 2 or more passing touchdowns in that game. The game that he did do it was against the Kansas City Chiefs. Definitely one of those matchups where these two teams always give each other their best shot. They go out there, they score a lot of points. And if Las Vegas had a chance to go out here and beat a Kansas City team that's kind of struggling, now is their opportunity. They allow just about 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And in my opinion, Derek Carr, worth the start. Up to New York now for the Jets and the Saints, and it sounds like we're going to have Taysom Hill under center here for the New Orleans Saints. He's going to try to gut it out and play through that finger injury, an injury similar to what we saw with Russell Wilson, just to a lesser extent, but who are we kidding? We're not overly concerned with the passing game in the hand of Taysom Hill. We need dude to run the ball a lot on the ground. Now, he's not going to have Mark Ingram more than likely, but it sounds like he could have back Alvin Kamara, who's been back at practice this week. No Deontay Harris in the passing game, which kind of helped boost his stats here this past week. But Alvin Kamara is definitely a sight for sore eyes in this offense. He's going to have a great opportunity to run against this defense as well of the New York Jets will Taysom Hill. They can't stop the run against anybody. They give up more rushing fantasy points than any other team in the NFL. So this is definitely a plus for Taysom Hill. Do I expect a huge game in the passing game? Probably not, when your top target's probably going to be like little Jordan Humphrey. Not expecting huge passing numbers, right? But if he can get us close to 100 yards on the ground and a touchdown, whatever we get through the air, should be a little bit of bonus, a little bit of gravy, and it should be enough to make him a start here this week. As for the Jets and Zach Wilson, guy actually looked like an NFL quarterback this past week, right? Didn't play half bad. Had 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, but now he gets a matchup against the New Orleans Saints. They allow 22 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. A lot easier to throw on them than it is to run on them. That's the second most fantasy points allowed. But how ballsy would you have to be to start Zach Wilson in a critical matchup heading into the fantasy playoffs? I'm talking about having basketball-sized cojones. I don't know if I could do that because the floor is super low and we haven't seen any consistency with him this season. I want to do it. I want to start him in a good matchup. I just can't. It's too risky. He's going to be a sit. Now we head over to Washington for the football team and the Dallas Cowboys, and finally, Dak gets all of his weapons back, and they should be pretty close to 100%. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and now a matchup against the Washington football team, who allows right around 25 fantasy points per game, the most in the NFL, to opposing quarterbacks. Plus Zeke, a little bit banged up, running game not that efficient here as of late. Just means you're going to throw the ball more, and you're going to continue to start Dak Prescott. As for the Heine, am I a fan of the Heine here this week in Washington? Yeah, I kind of am. It's a good matchup for him. Dallas allows right around 19 fantasy points per game. There's no Logan Thomas, which is going to hurt him inside the red zone. But with big play Terry McLaurin, he has that opportunity still at a bigger game. Plus, Antonio Gibson's a big play waiting to happen in the backfield. I expect Dallas to go out there and put some points up. What does that mean? It means Washington's going to have to continue to throw the ball all 4 quarters to keep pace, and that's why I'm going to start me some Heine here in Washington. He's not going to be super high in the rankings, but he will be a start. Now we dip down to Carolina for the Falcons and the Panthers, and the Cam experiment continues here. Once again, what do we expect out of Cam Newton coming off of the bye week? Because he struggled mightily in the game prior to the bye week to the point where he was actually benched. Now a matchup going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who allow right around 19 fantasy points per game, 7th most in the NFL. Cam is 100% boom or bust. He alone can win you your fantasy matchup or lose you your fantasy matchup. Obviously, that rushing upside is going to be there, and he does play better at home. This game at home against those Atlanta Falcons, who he's historically pretty good against, it's kind of a gut call here for me, but I'm going to start Cam Newton. For Matty Ice, another guy that's super hard to trust because there's no consistency. We've said that word a lot here during that show. Only 1 touchdown for him over the last month is not ideal for Matt Ryan in this passing game of the Atlanta Falcons. They just faced off against this Carolina team back in week 8. Matt Ryan scored like 7 fantasy points. They just can't seem to get Kyle Pitts and Cordero Patterson going at the same time. It's like they kind of alternate drives every once in a while, but they can't put all the pieces together and really be prolific through the air. And Matt Ryan's numbers are the ones that are suffering because of it, and he's going to remain a sit. Over to Houston now for the Texans and the Seahawks, and Russ is starting to bounce back a little bit here the last couple weeks. Back-to-back games now with at least 2 passing touchdowns through the air, and last week he completed over 80% of his passes, which is the highest he's done so far this season. He also had his most pass attempts in a game over the last month with 37. Now, a matchup going up against the Houston Texans, they allow right around 19 fantasy points per game. With DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, the ceiling is definitely high. Plus, they're starting to use rookie Dwayne Eskridge a little bit here in this offense, and he's got plenty of weapons. The running game, somewhat non-existent. They'll only use it around the goal line. Russ isn't rushing a whole lot himself, but with those big play wide receivers in this offense, he could still have another solid game and going to be a start. What about for the Houston Texans? Sounds like we're going to have Davis Mills back this week again for the Texans under center. And it's not a bad matchup for him going up against Seattle, especially with no Jamal Adams now. But let's be honest here. If I made direct eye contact with you and asked you, could you trust Davis Mills to send you into the fantasy playoffs on a high note? Would you believe it? Probably not, right? You're super dependent on a couple big plays from the likes of Brandon Cooks, maybe even Nico Collins, something like that. I'm not even buying it. There's no way I'm trusting it here heading into the fantasy playoffs. I'm going to sit me some Davis Mills. Now we go to Denver for the Broncos and the Lions, and honestly, I don't like either side here in this game. Teddy Bridgewater is not 100% healthy, and that is apparent when you watch football on Sundays. Goff, he's going against the Denver defense, which in itself is just not ideal. Now, Teddy has only scored 18-plus fantasy points like once over the last 6 or 7 weeks. The Lions themselves are a lot easier to run on than they are to throw on. Anybody can run on the Lions. And when you have the likes of Javonte Williams, and it sounds like Melvin Gordon could be back as well, we could see a whole lot of them in this game kind of controlling the time of possession and taking some of the pressure off of Teddy B. That's why I'm really not that interested in Teddy here this week. For Goff, he played pretty well last week against Minnesota, but this is just a different defense going up against the Denver Broncos. They're forcing turnovers, and in my opinion, I'm not, risking it on a Detroit Lions quarterback to head into the fantasy playoffs. I'm going to sit both these guys here this week. Over to LA now for the Chargers and the Giants. Let's be honest, y'all aren't starting Jake Fromm, State Farm, when it comes to the New York Giants. We're not even going to waste a whole lot of time. He's definitely going to be a sit here for me, not worth that risk. On the other hand, you got Herbie, a weekly must start at the quarterback position, right? Especially in a matchup going up against New York that allows right around 18 fantasy points per game. And over the last 3 games played, Herbie's gone out there and had over 300 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. There's a concern, though, right? Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have both tested positive for COVID. And what does that mean for this weekend's game? As of right now, they have not been ruled out. At the time of this recording, they're still there, but this is something we're definitely watching closely. If he loses both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, it may be one of those weeks where we have to fade Justin Herbert. We'll touch on this later in the week, probably this weekend during the live show to really see what's going on here. But just know he's lost his two biggest weapons potentially here due to COVID in week 14. Now, obviously, though, if they play, he's a must start every single week. He's got plenty of weapons to still throw to, but it's really going to lower his ceiling if he doesn't have Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. Pay close attention to this one. You may want to have a backup option in place just in case. Over to Cincinnati now for the Bengals and the 49ers, and I'm really worried about Joey B, if I'm being completely honest. He's playing with a finger injury. T. Higgins himself is banged up. We got big play wide receivers like Jamar Chase dropping deep touchdown passes, and Joe Burrow himself hasn't had 2 touchdowns throwing through the air over the last 4 games played. That's a problem because now he gets a matchup against San Francisco, even though it's going to be at home, a very tough defense to go out there and put up big points on. I'm more worried, though, about not being able to make it all game, right? That's the biggest issue is when you start a player that has an injury, you run the risk of him going out there, playing a few, snaps and realizing, hey, listen, too much pain. I can't make it. I'm a liability to my team. They pull him early. That's going to be where my biggest issue is for Joe Burrow. And because of it, I don't know if I'm willing to risk it here this week. He's going to be a sit. Had he been out there just lighting it up here as of late, throwing 2, 3, 4 touchdowns a week, 300 yards a game, okay, maybe we take that risk, but he's already been struggling, has some, chips stacked against him as is, add the injury on top of it, worries me a little bit too much, so he's going to be a sit. As for the San Francisco 49ers and Jimmy G, he continues to play solid football each and every week. 2+ touchdowns now in 4 of the last 5 games he's played. Does he get Deebo Samuel back? Questionable, right? I don't think we see Deebo here this week, but George Kittle playing on another level. And even though Cincy has a pretty tough defense, there's still enough options in this offense for Jimmy G to go out there and put up a solid floor game. Plus, don't forget, the running game is banged up as well. Maybe there's less running here this week, having to rely a little bit more on the passing game. That only helps Jimmy G. He's going to be a start. Out to Tampa Bay now for the Bills and the Bucks, and this is going to be my Manscaped must-watch game of the week for the quarterback position. And just a quick reminder, fellas, as soon as this video is over, head over to manscaped.com. Get yourself a Christmas present. It's going to be on sale. Just tell the significant other, hey, listen, I got something on sale. I couldn't pass it up. And find yourself something nice over at manscaped.com. It's not just ball trimmers. They got cologne. They got body wash, shampoo, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. Use that code word headliners at checkout. Get 20% off and free shipping. As for the game, though, kind of a no-brainer. Do I need to sit here and tell you to start Josh Allen and Tom Brady? No, I probably don't. In a matchup that could be pretty high-scoring and go back and forth, 2 teams full of offensive weapons, plenty of opportunities for points to be scored in this game, and they're definitely going to be must-starts here every single week. No need to waste a whole lot of time on this matchup. You know what to do here. Up to Green Bay now, though, for the Packers and the Bears. And once again, Justin Fields starting for the Chicago Bears, going to make his return here this week in Green Bay. A rematch of Week 6. A tough matchup, though, for Justin Fields going up against Green Bay, who allows only 16 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's 5th best in the NFL. Now, obviously, we love the rushing upside of Justin Fields, but there's just too much risk involved in this offense. Now, David Montgomery missing a little bit of practice. That's probably just because he's tired from having to carry the entire team on his back for a couple weeks, but I do expect Justin Fields to go out there and once again show glimpses. Is it a safe enough start to want to activate him into your fantasy roster here right away? No, not yet. He'll remain a sit here this week. But as for Aaron Rodgers, coming off the bye week, is his toe still bothering him? Is he any better here? He has a healthier Aaron Jones back in this offense. We saw him just before the bye week in a limited role, but he should be back and good to go here this week. And he played good against Chicago in Week 6. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's a very safe option with a high floor each and every week, and he's going to remain a start once again here in Week 14. Which takes us to Monday Night Football, the Los Angeles Rams, Arizona Cardinals, and another couple of no-brainers here, right? 2 top fantasy quarterbacks that are both averaging over 21 fantasy points per game. Both had big games against each other back in Week 4. 2 solid defenses, but when these two get together, all defense goes out the window, and points are scored aplenty. Plenty of options on both sides of the football. Both seem to be fairly healthy here as of right now. So for Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford, if I could have had a second Manscaped matchup here in this show, it would have been this one, because I'm looking forward to watching this one on Monday Night Football. Both these guys going to be starts. All right, those are my starts and sits for the quarterback position here, Week 14 fantasy football. Hopefully I was able to help clarify a few things for you. If you could do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and like the video if you learned anything here over the last 20 minutes or so. We greatly appreciate all that support. Hopefully you guys are having a great week out there this week, and I'm looking forward to another fun week of fantasy football. Just a reminder, if anything changes here over the next few hours, the next few days, we'll continue to have our daily videos that come out and continue to give you updates so you have everything you need heading into the weekend. But like I said, hopefully you guys are having a great week, a great night, and we'll talk to you later.